Okay, good. Well, I want to welcome everybody, those that are present and those that are attending remotely. I see Bonnie just joined. Hi, Bonnie. To this year's annual Emory Award. It is presented to a resident of the state of Washington who has made an extraordinary contribution to the culture of the book. So before I go on, I want to thank, this is an experiment that we're doing technologically. We're doing a hybrid event. First time we've done this, and where we have some people here in person and others are joining us remotely. We have to thank Tim Schmidt, our webmaster and technological guru, for setting this up. He spent we've some dry runs, and it's quite a challenge to do this. I know a lot of organizations are trying to figure out how to do just what we're doing today. So I want to thank everybody, and Tim especially. For the award, nominations are solicited from our members and reviewed by a committee. This year's committee was chaired by Claudia Skelton and included Jane Carlin, Carla Rickerson, Michael Taylor, Jeff Long, and Ruth Jenkins. Claudia and Jane are former recipients of the award, which is named for Mead and Deborah Emory. They were lifelong bibliophiles and longtime active members of the Book Club of Washington. The committee recommended and the board approved enthusiastically the granting of this year's award to Jodee Fenton. I want to thank Jeff Long, who is a former book club board member and editor of the journal, for a wonderful biography of Jodee's life and achievements. He interviewed Jodee, did his own research, and that article will appear in the next issue of the journal. I have taken some highlights from that article, and I could, it's quite a bit, because he did, it's actually such a wonderful job. I'm going to hire him in advance to do my obituary. Unfortunately, it won't be as interesting as this because there's just not that much to talk about. But in any event, Jodee earned a BA in philosophy and literature from Wisconsin's Ripon College. Jodee was drawn to Chicago, where her library career began with a job at the Newbury while studying for a master's in library science at the University of Chicago. With her MLS in hand, she worked in technical services at Wayne State University in Detroit, and then came to Seattle, where she had a part-time library position at Seattle University, while at the same time earning a BFA at University of Washington. And this is really significant. This would be, obviously, everybody knows, a Bachelor of Fine Arts. That's obviously different from her library degree that she had before. There, she studied under Jacob Lawrence, Michael Spafford, Robert Jones, and others. Upon finishing that, she moved then to Alaska. And although she didn't stay long, she made a contact there that became a significant catalyst in her contribution to Seattle's book culture. Back in Seattle then in 1989, Jodee was hired by the Seattle Public Library as a substitute librarian. Her SBL tenure was marked by swift ascendancy and substantial milestones. Advancement to art librarian was followed by fine art and performing arts coordinator, and then coordinator of the move to the temporary central library. This involved handling the logistics for the demolition of the old central library and the construction of the new library, which, as you know, was designed by Rem Koolhaas's firm. This required moving and temporarily housing the entire central library collection at the Washington State Convention Center and a couple of other offsite storage facilities. Jeff noted that well, Jodee told him, I assume, that it was the documented collection was around 900,000 items, and Jodee thought that, well, I bet we've got more than that. And it turned out that there were 1.2 million titles to be counted. Her dedication to the project required working a year straight without a day off. When the new Central Library opened in 2004, Jodee headed the Seattle History Collection, which involved consolidating all local history resources within the library for ease of access and efficient management. First to be assimilated into the Seattle History Collection was the Seattle Documents Collection, which was a vast municipal archive composed of published documents by the city and its agencies going back from 1884 to 2017. At the same time, she also began the digitization of the Seattle History Collection, which has allowed access to thousands of images from our history. Although the Seattle Room was not included in the original plan, Rem Koolhaas and his team carved out a space for the collection and a small reading area on the 10th floor where it resides today. According to Ann Ferguson, the current curator of the Seattle Room, Jodee had a vision for how material related to Seattle history should be evaluated, curated, collected, and made available to the public. But Jeff adds, but dreams are cheap. Their realization is born by belief, tenacity, and often deep resources. So in the storyline here, appear Hugh and Jane Ferguson, not related to Anne, but I know the Fergusons because they've been benefactors to the arts, performing arts and museum in our community for many years. When Jodee was in Alaska, they became acquainted. Hugh had a construction company called Ferguson Construction Company, and it did a lot of work in Alaska. When he came, but he always maintained his connections. He lived here in Seattle, even though he did a lot of work up in Alaska. At some point, he heard that about Jane's concept for the Seattle Room, which was still, the museum is still in the design phase at this point. And he thought it was important, was impressed, and provided some seed money, some important money to fund the construction of this part of the library. And it resulted in a incorporation of that room into the overall library design. So he was his contribution really made the difference in having that as convincing Rem Koolhaas to incorporate this part of the history collection and special collections. The Fergusons continued to support Jodee's work with substantial contributions to the Seattle Room's acquisition fund, and which also stimulated other significant donations from the community. Listed in Jeff's article are a second collection of the Edward Curtis North American Indians, which was donated by Harriet Bullitt, an enhanced edition of the Aerosmith map, which was donated by Doug Raff, an inclusion, a separation actually of the aviation collection, which was first formed with the Boeing Company in the 1930s, and a genealogy department, a zine collection, and so many different aspects of the special collections have been developed in just in the last 15 years as the new library has taken effect. She's also done a number of exhibits, including the first folio, which I think many of us saw, and she's done several exhibits of that and hosted some exhibits for members of the Book Club of Washington, including a wonderful journey through the Edward Curtis portfolios and books that they have. Judy retired in 2019 from the library as Managing Librarian Special Collections. SBL Special Collections is now staffed by 6 librarians and 1 clerical staff. Jodee left the department poised for a defined focus, designed for ongoing success, and the satisfaction of a career well spent. Her department is more robust than ever. As with any dedicated librarian, Jodee's retirement is occupied with her enthusiasm for books. She served as the president of the Book Club of Washington, as a board member for 10 years, wrote articles for the journal, hosted events for our members, and she remains now an active member of the Guild of Bookworkers. She's continued her formal study of books. I think she's going to talk about some aspects of that. But chiefly through her pursuit of her second career as a book artist in her studio, which combines several aspects of her experience. Her formal study in fine art, as I mentioned, she had a fine arts degree, and this was probably her first love. Her study of literature and philosophy, and her study of rare books. Courses in bookbinding at the American Academy of Bookbinding have helped her create, at last count, over 20 fine bindings. And I see that Jodee has brought some examples for us to see here today. As the 2021 recipient of the Book Club of Washington Emory Award, Jodee's contributions to the culture of the book continue to be written. Before we hear from Jodee, I'd like to see if there's anyone else here would like to say a few words of appreciation for Jodee and her work. Jane?
Thank you very much. And it was an honor to serve on this committee. And thank you, Claudia, and to our other committee members. And it seems really fitting to have the very first in-person event returning to Dearborn House to celebrate the contributions of Jodee Fenton. So let's all give a round of applause. As you know, I came to the Pacific Northwest from the Midwest. And while I was very familiar with the area from my childhood, I had never worked in the area, and so was a little nervous about finding a community of like-minded individuals when I arrived. And of course, the Book Club of Washington was a haven for me, and your kindness and generosity in welcoming me to the community is most appreciated. I can remember early days on the Book Club of Washington having meetings on that red floor of the public library and taking the bus back and forwards to Tacoma. As I learned more about your work in the community at the Seattle Public Library and all that you have done from the book club, it is so evident that you are deserving of this award. You're an inspiration and a treasure for the Pacific Northwest. Not only are your career achievements stellar, but you inspire us all in your retirement as you have taken on book design and binding. And I'm so honored to include some of your work in the Collins Library collection. We all appreciate your wisdom and expertise in helping to build a collaborative community of book artists in the Pacific Northwest. Thank you for everything you do. Congratulations to your stellar career.
Thank you, Jane. So well spoken. I'd like to thank Bonnie Thompson Norman for her wonderful work on creating the certificate I'm going to present to Jodee, as well as this wonderful presentation binder. So here's you can see this. And Jodee, would you come up so I can actually give this to you? So just showing, I think we can see it here. The Emory Award is presented to Jodee Fenton by the Book Club of Washington for her extraordinary contribution to the culture of the book in the Pacific Northwest.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bonnie. It's lovely. So how I begin? Yes, you've heard a lot about me, but I'm going to show you a few things about this career that you've heard about, and maybe try to bring together some ideas that we all hold important and dear, and that is the culture of the book. And I want to put these two together in my talk today in ways that I'm sure you'll all recognize and resonate with you, but might give you a little inspiration and maybe a little humor along the way. But first of all, I want to thank the nominating committee for their work. I know that that's a tough job. I know their competition is pretty steep. And I know that there are plenty of people in the state of Washington who deserve the recognition that I'm getting today, and I'm humbled by that I'm even on the list. It's fabulous. And I have to thank the board for their work in making sure that this award can move forward, and it has now over the years, and I'm pleased to see that. And I'd also want to recognize and acknowledge that we're on Duwamish ancestral land, and that we appreciate their stewardship and are glad that we can be part of the community with them. All that said, I do want to talk about the book and culture. Let me see, are we? Oh, I see. How about this? Thank you. Tim has been wonderful and helpful in getting all this together. So this is our, like I said, a first hybrid. So if we have a few little moments where we have to figure things out, I'm sure you'll forgive us those and we'll move on. I want to tell you a little bit about myself, stuff that I did not tell Jeff for his article, and things that you may not know about me. I grew up in New Jersey in Ewing Township, which is part of Mercer County. And this is the Mercer County Public Library Bookmobile. And I'm not in that picture, just so you know. I'm after that picture. But the Mercer County Public Library was very important to me. And here's what I mean by things that will resonate, I think, with all of us. That place where you first go to read, you first go to find books, where people help you find books and help you answer questions that you didn't even really know you had. And that was the Mercer County Public Library for me. It became a storefront, and I used to walk there and check out books every weekend and bring them back the next weekend and check out more books. And I was in 5th grade when I started doing that. And then as time went on, the librarians there allowed me to go into the adult section. You couldn't do that in those days. You physically were not allowed to go into that part of the library, but they would sort of bring me over to certain parts of that collection that they thought would be appropriate. And so I was able to take home things like Shakespeare and Aristotle and Plato and history and religion and all the things that I really, really wanted to read. So they were very, very important to me. I'm going to show you another place. Once I figure out how to push the button. Another place that became really important to me is the Newbury Library in Chicago. I was fortunate enough to go to a seminar there, a semester-long seminar when I was in college on the English Renaissance. I did a critical edition, if you can believe that, when I was 18, 19, maybe 19 years old, of a little treatise, a pamphlet on the Union of Scotland and England in the end of the 18th century. And I learned a huge amount, but I it wasn't so much English history that I was learning, although there's plenty of that. I learned how this institution comes together, pulls materials together and preserves them, brings in scholars and lets them use the material, and that I could participate in that. I could be a player. So the Newbury for many years has been an inspiration for me, and I still use its catalog routinely to find things. Very glad it's online. Another place, and Claudia, you will recognize this place. This is the University of Virginia, and this is the part of the campus that was originally designed by Thomas Jefferson. And being here for Rare Book School, I went for 2 different sessions, showed me that the physical arrangement of a facility, of a learning facility like a campus or a library or however, could be designed in such a way that it could promote the intersections of ideas. So this is the library building. And then down from the library are 2 sets of what are called the ranges. And in the ranges, students lived and had in small rooms. And then there were the subject departments and faculty that had larger facilities, all in the ranges. And there were the idea was that you could walk down the ranges, talk to people in different departments, you could cross over in the lawn and talk to other people across the way, and students could interact with faculty in different ways. That's really important, because if the ideas are just sitting closed up in a codex somewhere on a shelf, then they never get their chance to influence people. And you never get a chance to really test that idea and bring it out and begin to work with it. So I think this is a remarkable architectural facility. You know, Thomas Jefferson, we could talk about him, but I think he made this one, this is really good. Then my next stop and a place that had real significance is the Seattle Public Library. I started when the 1960s building was up, and I love this postcard. It shows these 3 different views. Sorry about the bottom one cut off. That's kind of peculiar, but and the same with the new Central Library. But those are the next 2 buildings, and it's the Seattle Public Library that I'm going to concentrate on. So the majority of my career in libraries has taken place. And it's also where I took some of these ideas that I had in the beginning and began to see if they had any traction in the real world. You know, what would it mean to take some of these ideas forward? And I'm going to talk about 2 aspects here. One is that in order to have this culture of the book, you have to have, I think, 2 things. You have to have books. You have to have a collection. And it has to be solid and strong and good and well curated and cared for. And you also have to have people. And the people are staff to take care of that and make that collection work. And also people who can come and use it and take those ideas out of that collection and take them out into the world and test them, see if they're going to work. So we're going to look at a few cases of people and collections. So people. The tombstone belongs to the Notkins, Natalie Notkin and her husband. Natalie worked at the Seattle Public Library in the 30s. She was an immigrant from Eastern Europe, and she was in charge of the foreign language collection. And at the time that she came and was working there, the 2 other things were happening. There were other immigrants from all over the world coming and living in Seattle. And some of them were from Russia, and they were leaving Russia because of the consequences around the Russian Revolution. And there were white Russians who were more conservative, and there were red Russians who were more contemporary, more, I want to say liberal, but I think communist, socialist, probably I should say. And they did not agree. And they argued about what Natalie had put in the collection. And they felt that there was one group felt there was too much red propaganda, and the other group felt that there wasn't enough. So this came to a head, and the library board decided that Natalie would not be able to have this job and this would go away. So she sued, she brought forth a legal suit, and a judge in Seattle quashed that suit. And then the next year, the head of the library, the director, Judson Toole Jennings, decided that, well, after all, it was a depression, early 30s, we just really didn't have enough money to continue to pay Natalie, so the position will go away. And Natalie lost her job with no recourse possible for her. She was a really brave woman who decided to build a really good collection. She went on to have a very successful career at the University of Washington in their acquisitions department, continuing to purchase in her balanced way books from Eastern Europe. So that's one thing. Natalie is a hero, and it was a very tough time. Another thing that was happening at that same time was that there was a subcommittee in the House of Representatives that was looking for people who were who showed communist leanings, and they came up with a list of 17 people in Seattle, and Natalie was number 17 on that list. Natalie. Now, White Christmas. Another way in which people bring culture into the book world is the service that can happen when patrons come into the library. And this is one of my very, very favorite stories, and I'm so happy I get to tell it. It was in fact a dark and stormy evening. It was December 23rd, and the library was closing for the Christmas holiday. It's always closed on the 24th. So 23rd was the last day, and it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the music librarian is sitting at the reference desk. The phone rings and someone is asking for something, and what they needed were the lyrics to White Christmas. So this wonderful music librarian gets the lyrics and starts reading, and then there's a little pause and he starts singing White Christmas. And it's kind of, it's dark and it's cold outside. And here's this beautiful baritone voice singing White Christmas in the library. And we're all like going, oh, this is so sweet. Right? And then there's a pause, and the music librarian says, yes, there's a second verse. He sings the second verse. And it showed me that library service is personal. It's really personal. Whoever was asking that question could not have gotten better service that day than that beautiful rendition of White Christmas. So people are necessary in order to bring a collection to life. Collections. Yeah, there are a lot of them, and they continue to sort of multiply. You go home and you come in the next day, and there just seem to be more and more and more things, and sometimes it feels really overwhelming and hard to keep up with them. And there's physical space that is defined, and a collection, you can't really say it's only going to be 10 books or 7 books or 8,000 books. It's always going to move and grow and change, and things are going to happen to it. And you have to be kind of nimble in order to take care of this. And so this is a picture of the stacks in the previous building, the Carnegie Library, the Carnegie Central Library. And they had the same problem that we had when we moved out of the old library into temporary quarters, because there's just a lot of stuff. There's just physically a lot of stuff, and you have to deal with that. And the way libraries try to do it is to have a cohesive scope statement, so you kind of know where your collection's going to go. You can manage it. You have to also know that it's going to get bigger, and in the case of local history, it's never going to get smaller. There's always more history because more time has gone by. So that collection has to grow. And it was my duty, I thought, to explain that to people in such a way that they could see that the space had to be there to accommodate this. So a lot of good things happened because we were full. And I think the new Central Library is one of those. Well, just before I talk about these collections, I want to say that the other good aspect of building a new building is that it gave us a chance to rethink how we do things. So in the old library, there were very strong subject departments, and that worked for them for almost 100 years. really worked. And each subject department had its own little group of special collection books, each one separate, each one separate. And when we moved into the new central library, the idea was to not have these monolithic subject departments, but try to make the collection be a single collection, and take the special materials and put them in a place where we could preserve and protect them and make them even more accessible at the end of the day. There was some success with that, and that is still a work in progress, but I think it's the right direction. The library doesn't just have books. It's not just books. It's not even just archival material. It's not even just paper-based material. In the case of the Seattle Public Library, there's an art collection. And I love showing the art collection, and you can understand with my background why that would be important to me. This is a very small Paul Horiuchi painting, and it is by far my favorite, I think, in the collection. It is about this area. It feels really soft and lovely, like autumn can here. And this kind of a collection is a challenge for a library. It's a challenge to bring it into a library setting and have it contribute to the culture that the book is contributing to. Lots of books about Paul Horiuchi, but the real artifact is something different. And I wanted to just put this in here to bookmark the idea that the thought that the real thing is in fact really important. It carries with it information that a surrogate, a duplicate, a reproduction in a book cannot. This was done by Paul Horiuchi, his hand, his choices, his whole concept and perception of what this late summer afternoon would be. And I wanted to say this because I know the book club members really get this. And once we were at a tour of a private collection, one of our members opened their collection, and he had, and I'm certainly still has, the first edition of Leaves of Grass, the one by Whitman that Whitman printed himself and then signed. And the question was, well, gosh, there are you can have a lot of different Leaves of Grass, there are all kinds of collections. And what this member said was that this is the one that's closest to Whitman himself. He held it, he set the type, he put the paper in the press, he made this book, he signed it. I can't get any closer than that. And that's what the real thing does, is it gives you that opportunity to get close. Edward S. Curtis is a wonderful example of some of the issues that a public library can address. This is the famous image, it's called Vanishing Race. It's in volume 1 of the North American Indian, and it is an absolute stunningly beautiful picture, and it created a lot of misconception around the actual life of American Indians, but it also brings this very, very beautiful, subtly put together photograph, this new technology. It brings this whole thing to us in a way that's so easy to accept and understand. But I want to tell you the story about what happened at the Suquamish Museum. We could look at these pictures at the Suquamish Museum, but there are archivists brought out pictures that were taken the very same year of children in the back of a pickup truck, Native children being taken off to a boarding school. Exact same year, these two pictures were taken. I think that's really important to understand. I want to talk a little bit about social history because one of the scope changes that we made a number of years ago for the Seattle collection was to add social history, call it out as something that we wanted to collect. And it has been an absolute joy. The curator of the collection has been working to bring in materials that are that go way beyond sort of traditional scholarship, but that offer a real depth to understanding how people have lived in Seattle. And this is just one example of many, many different kinds of things. This happens to be a menu from Andy's Railroad Diner. And you can get ham and eggs for like $1. I should go there every day. It's my favorite food. So that social history, I think, is really, really important, and it adds a layer of history that helps us understand how everybody was living, not just the politicians or just the business people, but what life was like on an everyday basis. Clearly something that needs to be collected and protected. Everybody knows where this is, right? It's in Paris. The Red Wheelbarrow is a little bookstore, an English bookstore in Paris. And when my husband and I were visiting there, we walked all over Paris, and we actually, our hotel was only a few blocks from this place, but we didn't find this until the day we left. And I was like, darn. But what I wanted to say about this is that the way information is created and brought forward has changed. And just in this last pandemic time, we have seen it change even more and dramatically. We do Zoom sessions. We rely on so much digital information, and I've been sort of poking around in digital collections all over the world looking for things for my research paper. And I'm amazed at what's available that way. So even though this looks like a little tiny shop and we love it, always remember that there's so much more information that you can get your hands on. Speaking of what I've been doing my research on, this is a livre d'artiste, and the binding is done by Paul Bonnet. I'm just talking about the red one at this point. He also did the other one, the circle one, but that's a different book. The livre d'artiste is a type of artist book that I have been working on, and it's closest, I think, to the kinds of books that I've been creating. These books took contemporary literature, and it's almost exclusively French in the beginning, contemporary literature, produced a letterpress book in small limited edition with illustrations or artwork done by noted artists. Today, they are well-noted artists like Henry Moore and Picasso and Matisse, and so the list is long, Manet. And then the best part about this, dear book club members, is that most of these, not all of them, but a good chunk of them were produced by small book clubs in Paris. So these book clubs would produce these books. They were always in a paper wrapper, traditional Paris binding, because they expected you to take your book to your binder and put whatever binding on it you wanted. And therein comes Paul Bonnet, this really great binder, and many of his colleagues who designed extraordinary bindings for these books. That livre d'artiste has been something that I have been working with, and as you'll see in some of the books that I've done, I try to make my way with that. So this is one of my books. So we're going to leave the library world now. And after February 19th of 2019, I walked out the library door and started this sort of more or less started this new activity. I have a studio in my house, and I spend a lot of time there. I study with Don Glaister, who is a faculty member at American Academy of Bookbinding, and I'm learning how to do all kinds of wonderful things. This is the poem by William Butler Yeats, The Second Coming. The book is called The Second Coming Again, because it feels like we're now at this new millennium thing, and it's time to do it. It feels like it's happening again, what he describes in the poem, which is this sort of resident evil that reared its head at the turn of the century, and shows that things that were bothering Yeats at the time were things like nationalism and anarchism and a lot of injustices that were happening. And we see the same thing, or at least we certainly did, in the last administration, and that inspired me to take this poem and work with it. So Bonnie Thompson Norman and her Window Pane Press took the poem and printed it letterpress, and then I made paintings and put the paintings in the poem, in the book, and then bound it. So this is a leather binding with onlays, and I think that's a binding that's familiar to you, Jane. Jane Carlin, I think if you want to see this one in person, you can go to the Collins Library. She has the copy there. Thank you, Jane, for that. This is a book, it's called Quilted, and the book is a wonderful compilation of different quilting artists, and it's a standard published book, but this person in Canada, in Toronto, has maybe 15 copies pulled aside before they're cut and bound in the traditional commercial way, and then they invite fine binders to make bindings for them. So I got invited to do this. And this is my binding about quilts. This is another example of the second coming. I had Bonnie make 30 copies. I don't know that I'll ever get them all bound. Don't ever do 30. But it's been fun and really interesting to try to interpret that poem and different parts of it in different ways. So the copy you saw before comes from and darkness fell again in the poem. And so those lines coming down, those patterns coming down, and darkness falling again. This is this beast, this creature that pulls itself up out of the sand and comes to menace us. And here you can see the inside of the book. This is the title page. All these paintings, the paintings that you see are all paintings that I've done. Each book has a different set of paintings for it. And here's another one of those paintings in that book. Oh, sorry, duplicate. Then I have two more things to show you, and then we're good. This is a drawing that I've done based on a map of the watershed of the Elwha River. And I am interested in the Elwha River because of the removal of the dams and the ability for the salmon to regenerate, and the whole watershed coming back alive. And so I have been working with this image for a while, and I wanted to show you this because there's something happened in this one that was really, really important to me. You can see a salmon in here. You can see the salmon's tail on the right-hand side, the fin on the right-hand side, and then the fish that goes all the way through. And to me, it seems that's the most important part, is somehow that watershed is in fact the salmon. Its shape is the salmon. It is part and parcel. And so the book that will come from this, I think will have Mokuhanga prints in it based on the watershed and some other things, and then some natural pieces from that time, from that area will be in it as well. So that's one of the things I'm working on. And then the other thing that is this is the next thing that will get done. And this also was printed at Window Pane Press. And Bonnie, I know you remember this page almost exactly. Bonnie did a fabulous job of seeing through this printing on paper that I had already painted, and helped me place the text throughout the book. But this particular page, I think, is one of my favorites, because the lines that you see, the painted lines that you see, are actually the map of the battlefield of Gettysburg. And there is something about the power of that place that, the map, the leaf shapes, the physical environment of Gettysburg still holds the power of those 4 horrible, horrible days in American history. And I want to make this book because I want the book to carry some of that feeling so that when you look at it, you're not only reading words you almost know by heart, but you're seeing and feeling and understanding something more about the sanctity of that battlefield. So, in summary, if I could summarize my argument, Counselor, I think it's really important that we have these collections and people around them. And it's important that we use them in ways to help us learn and stretch and grow, and that we create a culture out of that, which then imparts a much more refined way to live in a community. And I hope that my work at the library has done that. And I hope that the books that I make can do that as well. And again, I thank you all so much. It's wonderful to see you all here and online. And hopefully you'll get to see more of my work. Thank you.
That was just absolutely terrific. What a great recipient of the award. And I tell you, the work you put into the presentation, it just terrific. It was wonderful. I appreciate that, and we all do. And to see how you've been able to take your love of fine art and now integrate it into your books is inspiring, really, for all of us. And maybe you can. I know you have several of your books that are out here, and you could give a little tour of those books. But we have, before that, we have some champagne and cupcakes. So for you that are remotely, you're going to have your own cupcakes, I'm afraid, and champagne. I want to thank everybody, and again, thank Tim for making this happen.
Can we just ask a couple questions?
Sure, go on ahead.
Judy, that's marvelous about that salmon in the map. Was that deliberate or did you just see it?
It became deliberate. You know, I think one has a conversation with an artwork as you're making it, and sometimes things show themselves and you have to be there to see it or something. You know, I don't know if that makes sense, but yes, it is. I did not alter any of the streams or watershed things. I mean, it just is that. I know, it's magic, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Yeah. Any other questions?
I have one more.
Okay.
The artwork that you showed, what was the name of that piece?
The Horiuchi?
Yeah, the Horiuchi.
Late summer.
Late summer.
It's called Late Summer.
Are they still collecting art?
Not actively. However, there is a policy that allows the library to make a determination if something's offered to them, whether they want it or not. And it includes whether it will fit into the Northwest Art Collection. So but we didn't want to close the door because you never know what could come and how wonderful it could be. You know, you don't know that. I mean, if someone wanted to donate a work of art that was significant for a reason, we want to be open and available to think that through. So that's kind of where that is.
Okay, thanks again, everybody. So
I'll take it.
you take care of it. Okay.
Right, I'm gonna shut down the meeting now.